Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brave Zone. We are going to start our webinar soon about the 10 ways to crisis proof your business. And thank you so much for making the time to attend. Um, you know, I always think that every time things happen, with the coronavirus and everything like that, or any kind of disaster, there's always a time to think and reflect and try to see if we can come back from it a lot stronger and braver. So that's the reason why I put together this webinar, because in as much as now there's a lot of gloom and doom, especially now with the prime minister in the ICU in the UK and everything like that, was probably a big shock to all of us. It was definitely a big shock for me. But I want to keep the energy positive and productive. And that's why I've put together um, this webinar. This webinar is based on what I have observed and what I have practiced as a business leader. This is not only by reading books or anything like that, because I have gone through quite a number of tragedies and disasters when running my businesses or turning around my businesses as well. And I'll share that with you later. The essence of this webinar is really, when we are in a gloom doom situation and all we can think of is what's wrong with the existing situation, where a lot of us is operating from what I call the fear zone. Our We panic, we may be emotionally distraught because of all this, and this is really activated because of fear. And it is being afraid of losing income, being afraid of the future, which all that is very fair, all that is very real, and I'm not discounting any of that. But the question is it productive to operate from fear? Because usually, sometimes fear is a good driver of action, but usually it also is the thing that gets us stuck and gets us into unnecessary panic mode. Interesting, today we're going to talk about this. Every day in my company in Indonesia, we have what we call a daily culture statement. So today's culture is all about fear, false expectations appearing real. And sometimes, if we are driven by fear, we fail to see just the facts. We kind of go beyond the fact and make up false assumptions. And the facts, which is already quite a serious fact and a serious problem, we make it even bigger because these false assumptions. So I want to have us all step into the brave zone, and for the next hour just think of solutions. Let's think of solutions, lessons, because all this will be finished at one point and we don't know when that is, and it's useless really to think about when is it going to be over. It's just like it's such a useless question. But it is going to be over, like many tragedies have come and gone. um, but what can we do better? So thank you for your commitment, and let's step into our brave zone, and let's approach this next hour at least to, and hopefully beyond, with your inner brave. A little bit about me, and some of you may have seen the slide if you were in the previous webinar. When I started business, I started working in 1996. I started working in Indonesia. So even though I grew up in the States, I started working in Indonesia. And in '98, we had a political coup. So our president was forced to step down. And before all that were riots, as burning on the streets. And these are scenes actually. This is what my city looked like for days and weeks, and we were forced to stay at home. We didn't have mobile phones back then. There was no Zoom or anything like that. We had a little pager. Yeah, that's how old I am. So we had that, and it was a big disruption in the business. And it was also personally scary for me because I come from a Chinese Indonesian background, and a lot of the violence at that time was directed towards our race, because we've always experienced racial discrimination. And that's also quite scary personally for me. Then we all know about the 9/11. That was a global disruption to the economy as well. um, we had the SARS outbreak, and being at that time a supplier of the hospitality industry, I saw hotel occupancy go from 90% to 0% overnight. And my region at that time was East Asia. I was managing that region, so obviously the revenues were hit. But it was an interesting one because it was revenues were definitely hit, but we made up in other ways because we started being creative, and it instead of selling the things that we had, we also looked into what our customers were needing at the time, and we sold a lot of high profit products. Thankfully, we were in the hygiene sanitation industry, and I was in the pest controlled industry. We started spraying rooms, disinfecting spaces, and it was a very high profit uh, service. So, in as much as yes, we lost a lot of revenue and profits, but at the same time, we also, thanks to the creativity of the team, we also made up a lot of that back. And you'll see that when I go through the slides today. Um, I think the blessing from this crisis is that we we can no longer do business by saying this is my product, this is what I want to sell, and then go find customers for it. It's more about you're forced to become more customer centric. It's not about what I want to sell, it's about what do you want to buy. Like I want to sell live workshops right now. I love engaging. I would love to meet you guys in person, shake your hand, you know, do live workshops. We can do workbooks and everything like that. I've done that for years. It's not about what I want to sell because you're not going to buy a ticket to a live workshop right now. So I've got to get creative. Um, so I'm doing webinars, and soon digital courses, because it's no longer about who you are. It's no longer about what your business is. It's about, well, okay, but is that what the customer wants to buy? So we are going to be forced to be customer centric. And for many of us, we will find a very profitable way to grow our business when we decide to be customer centric. um, you know, I'm just going to quickly go through this, but that was the era that I went to. Bali was bombed. Then we had Jakarta being bombed twice. And then we had the tsunami, which happened in Thailand, but it affected my country because when the Thais could not fulfill their financial budget, guess what? The numbers flew right back down to Indonesia. We were a Fortune 500 company. Shareholders are waiting. That they don't care. Even until last year, we still had riots. It wasn't as big as previously, but we still had riots because of some political party who wasn't happy with the president, etc. And then we had floods, so natural disasters as well. But amidst all that, and I don't say this to impress you, but to impress upon you a certain point, amidst all that, I managed to still perform in the business. My firm was awarded for a good straight 10 years of we had awards about coaching, we had awards about client retention, we had awards about our revenue, the strength of our team. And I think the point is that everyone is affected by all this. Many of us will survive, but only a few of us, if we know what to do with our business now for the future, a few of us will thrive. So this is not a webinar about survival. This is a webinar about thriving. And I want to engage you to think about how can your business thrive? I describe myself as a despite person. See, in my view, there's a despite person and there's a because person. A because person will say, I can't do this because, and then a list of excuses, a list of reasons. And many of those reasons will be perfectly valid. I can't do this because of coronavirus. I can't do this because the virus has taken away all my clients and my businesses have closed down. I've got nobody else to supply. You're right. You are right that all those reasons are correct. But I want to engage you to become a despite person. I grew my business despite of the coronavirus, despite of the fact that my client's business closed down. I managed to find another solution to grow my business and to grow my income for my family. So I challenge you to be that as well. And I think the good thing about growing up and living in a developing country is we didn't have the government support and all the nice things that developed countries are used to. So if we were going to live, we have to become a despite person. And I came from a very privileged home, and I was a very spoiled child. Probably it was a personal, conscious decision to become a despite person, because I think with all these crises and chaos that I've gone through, it's made me stronger, and that's my why, to go through it. So I also challenge you while you're going through this webinar to find your personal why. If you were going to be a despite person, if you were going to crisis proof your business, why would that be important to you? And go beyond income, go beyond your survival needs, go beyond, oh, because I need to go, put my kids through school and everything like that. What's in it for you personally? What's the personal growth you want by becoming a more of a despite person? And you've all proven that today because you're here on the webinar. So I congratulate you for that. So a little bit about me, just because some of you may not, maybe your first time. I guide self-employed professionals to improve personal clarity, belief systems, confidence, overcome personal limiting beliefs, and also because I can mix between psychology and business, I also sharpen their business strategies because for some of us we need a more practical approach. My style is I work quickly. I do spend only about 4 to 6 sessions. I mean, sometimes 2 sessions, sometimes 1 sessions, depending on what you need. Most people have said that working with me is quicker than working with other types of coaches, simply because, probably because I come with practical experience. I own 2 companies, which is gratefully being run by my team, who are also on lockdown in Jakarta, but they've been great. We've had our daily huddles and everything like that. And I've joined them 1 or 2 times simply just to offer my support. So they've been great. And I also, I dabble in book writing, and I love the subject of sales, even though I don't profess myself as a sales coach or anything. But I have been in sales since '97. So the book How to Make More Money in Sales is really all about the finer distinctions between a good salesperson and a great salesperson. And people have said that's after reading that book, they've closed sales, they've gotten the little nuances. So it makes me happy. So my objective today is to help you review your business. Take this time that the coronavirus is giving us, and let's prepare for a solid comeback. As Arnold says, I'll be back. And this is where I want you to put your head on this. So let's keep strong, and let's do this together. So my promise to you today is I will educate you on these 10 things to crisis proof your business. This is not just a motivation and mindset session. We will go into business strategies. I want you to reflect on some questions for your business. So please have a pen and paper handy, because I do want you to jot it down. Probably won't have time to have question and answer today, but who knows, we can always, you can always journal that later. You will get strategies to use immediately. If any of you have been in my webinars, you know that I don't hold back on content. Sometimes I run a little bit over time, try not to do that, but I get so excited to share stuff with you. So you will get some strategies to use immediately. And there's always a next step that you can take if you are ready to get more serious in your business and you want some fresh perspectives. So this, I just want to share with you a recommendation I got on email from an ex-client of mine in Indonesia. He's a managing director of a German industrial solutions company, and one of his sales managers passed him one of my articles. Coronavirus is giving time to think, and this is a big corporate, and everybody's on doom and gloom mode, and he just emailed me. He said, oh my God, thank you for making my point. I've been preaching this for 3 weeks, that we should leverage this time instead of being on doom and gloom. So I wanted to share that with you today. If you are looking for some resource, and sometimes it's for your team, right? Sometimes you need an external person to tell them, instead of that. But look for this article on my LinkedIn, and feel free to share it with people who think you think will need it, because it does give you a different perspective on how to manage this situation. So I've separated the 10 things into different categories, because if you're looking at a business, we do have to talk about financial strategies. It's not just about marketing all the time. And sometimes the way we have been treating or not treating our clients is making us crisis prone. Okay. And sometimes it's within our systems, and definitely there's stuff we can do better with our team. So this is how I want you to think about this, instead of jumbling it all up together. Okay, so let's get to work on financial strategies. When you're looking at financial strategies, what I've learned is that when times are bad, cash is king. So the first question is, how can you have a bigger cash reservoir in your business? Now, you might be looking at me rolling your eyes and say, well, that's the point, Sin. I can't, because now all the business is bad. Right. But again, we're trying to crisis proof our business for the future. What's happened in the past has happened. See, when you look at cash, I'm not talking just about get more revenues. Okay. There's a few things that affect cash. You get revenue, but you don't have enough profit from that revenue. So let's say you sell your products at cheap prices, or you sell your services too cheap, and you don't really have a leverage plan. You don't, you're exerting a lot of energy for very little money. So you're not very profitable. So all your revenue, like a big percentage of that, has gone to pay for your expenses. So there's really nothing left behind for you as a business owner. Okay. So selling at low profits is a bad cash strategy. Okay. But let's say you sell at good profits, but you don't have a good system to collect payment, or you're too lenient with your payment policy. Profit is not cash. Profit is just this theoretical figure you get after selling at a certain price minus all the expenses. But if you don't have a system for receivables, accounts receivables, collecting payment, or a policy that is quite strict, or maybe you're so busy doing the marketing and everything, you forget that there's a few bills that you actually need to collect, you still don't have cash. So we've talked about profitability. We've talked about collecting payments. Also, payments to your suppliers. Sometimes you're very, very on time for your suppliers, but you're not collecting on time for yourself. So how do you negotiate better payment terms with your suppliers? Okay. Next is expenses. Some of you have figured out that throughout this virus, perhaps the way you've been doing your business, you've had a lot of overheads. Okay. You've had a lot of fixed expenses. If I sell this gadget, right, this pointer, right, if I sell this for 10 pounds, let's say the cost is 5 pounds, then I've got a profit of 5 pounds, right? I don't need this to exert this expense if I'm not selling the product. But my electricity bills, my salary, my online marketing bills, whatever, these are some other things are fixed expenses for your business. And sometimes maybe you've had, I can only say this because I've made the mistake as well. Okay, so all the stories, all the lessons, so-called, that I preach is, I've done it. Okay, I've done it. I remember I had such a big office because it was cool, and and meeting rooms. I had big open spaces, and at that time we overexpanded too soon. Our team was really not that big. We had these big hiring plans, and in retrospect, okay, those were the days when co-working spaces were not yet available. It's not a concept at that time. But at the same time, looking back, the best thing I ever did a couple of years ago was move my office to a very small space. And we had 3 meeting rooms, and that was enough, right? And until today, we've got a co-working space just at the ground floor that we can use for extra meeting rooms if we need to. We never really need to spend more money on rent. I remember my client coming to the office just to pay a visit, and I think he was having his coaching session there. He looked at my new office at the time, the small one, and he said, "Oh my God, I could totally smell profit and cash here." And I said, "What do you mean?" It's like, "You've got such an efficient office, very minimal rent, and I can smell this is a very good money-making strategy." And I said, "Okay, great." Confirmation. That was exactly what I wanted to do. I felt that we could do our operation with with lower overheads. So overheads is something that you need to pay attention to as well. So that's cash, right? If you are in a business of inventory, let's say you're a restaurant, or you buy products, or maybe you have some supplements or something that you're selling, also your purchasing plan. In the mid 90s, there was this this whole just in time concept. You buy things just in time that you need to sell them. And I know it's not always possible. Remember, we were using products that were imported. So we had 3 months, and we had to plan all these things out. But there's something to be said about planning your purchase, because sometimes cash gets tied up with dead inventory. One of my first clients I remember was a nuts and bolts company. He, like screws, nuts, bolts, big size, small size, and his cash flow was tied up because he had a lot of dead stock. So look at your inventory. Is there something that you can sell, even at a low rate? Sometimes it's not about being profitable during these times. Sometimes it's about just making cash. Having cash. So that's all about cash. Now, let's say you have cash. The next question is, how can your cash grow more cash? And this is something perhaps a lot of people who focus on making active income fail to realize, that making passive income is actually very important as well. Passive income sometimes is misdefined. It's like you have to have 10 properties, they're all making cash flow, blah, blah, blah. Let's take it a lot simpler than that. You've got extra cash and you manage your lifestyle. You don't spend above your means, and you put away a certain amount every month, even if it's just £100 or £50 or anything like that, into a mutual fund. Okay. You might think, well, glad I didn't do that because it just collapsed over 20% and everything. Yeah, but it will bounce back. Actually, if you have cash now, we are waiting, like I am waiting for me to invest more cash in, because I'm waiting for that drop. I'm waiting for that bounce. And then this is a perfect time to buy. If you have cash right now, you're very happy. You should be very happy, because the markets are down, 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 and it can only go back up. And we don't know when the down ends, and we have to wait for it. But it's a good time to just keep that cash. Don't go investment crazy on property or hard assets like that, simply because it's harder for you to cash it out. I mean, of course, if the property market drops, we're also ready to invest. But it's the question is also, like, sometimes when you are too busy making money, you sometimes forget that money has a responsibility to grow as well. You don't want just 0.5% interest, or maybe in developed countries is nothing really, because you don't want it to just grow in some bank account. Okay, you got to make something with it. But again, it's also understanding yourself about how good are you at at making cash make more cash. For instance, I would never manage my own stock market portfolio. I have just lost too much money in it. I know I don't have that temperament. I would, despite what people say about mutual funds and leaving money for other people to manage, I will do that, because I will choose a financial advisor that I trust. And then I will do that, because I know that when I try to do it myself, that's not my game. My mom, for instance, she just goes on fixed deposit. And for her, living in Indonesia, that's still fine. For our company, for instance, we have a certain rule about certain amounts of cash, which is about 9 months, 6 to 9 months of operation, we need to have as liquid. I mean, it goes nowhere except fixed deposits. We don't go crazy. We don't go too creative on it. But we also have some rules about how we pay dividends. So it's also having certain rules around how does your business money get invested. What are your rules for your dividends, so you can use that money to grow your personal wealth profile. Okay, so that's really the two main things about finance. Okay, now let's talk about client strategies to safeguard revenue. I want to take a look at how you look at your business. When you look at a business and how you market your products, I mean, we were hit with the online disruption years ago, but some business still don't get it. I remember this silver antique shop that we were working with last year. Okay. And when you're looking at how the high street has kind of just died down and people are shopping online, it also affects boutique shops like this silver antique shop, because when the high street, when people are not shopping by coming into a shop anymore, they also don't come to that particular area where this boutique antique shop is. So they are also disrupted. One of the things I said to the founder was, your shop front is not your shop front. Who is your target market? And he was saying people that walk down streets and everything. But I also know a little bit of background about that antique shop, and I also know that the Chinese tourists love silver. So I said, well, what are you doing on WeChat, which is the WhatsApp version and beyond of in China? It's called WeChat. You can do transactions with it. You can transfer money through it. You can market through it. It's amazing. And he said, well, this is what so-called we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, your shop front is not your shop front. And actually, most of your big clients are not even those people who are passing through the doors. They're not the British people, they're the Chinese people. And when you need to start doing a few things. So he started engaging concierge in hotels to bring Chinese tourists here. When the Chinese tourists come to his shop, he starts getting their data and befriending them on WeChat. And he's got, and I said, hire a young Chinese sales executive who can keep the long distance communication in Mandarin. Because in as much as the Chinese love to get to know other people, but they're also very exclusive. They trust other Chinese people. So he did that. And you can say that his online presence is growing significantly, to the point that sometimes on a month, this particular girl can bring in as much sales as he gets in his shop front. So when you stop relying, just think of this, your shop front is not your shop front. That's why I put it in quotes. Shop front could be online, could be whatever, so what is it for you? Now, I don't know your industry, I don't know what you're up to, but I want you to think about that. If my shop front wasn't just people coming in, traffic, wasn't just the meetings I held, as a consultant selling face to face, what is my shop front? Because in as much as we say business is bad right now, people are still buying, people are still working. They're just working from home. Business is not bad, but physical business is bad. Okay. There are still opportunities, and I want to challenge you to find those opportunities for your business. How can you build bigger and better emotional bank accounts with your clients? Some of you who have read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People know that Stephen Covey talks about the emotional bank account. Emotional bank account is basically the bank of trust, right? So let's say all this time, you've been treating your clients just like a number. And I know when things get busy, it's easy to forget the people who have bought from you. And this is something that I've learned myself. Sometimes we're so busy finding new clients, we forget to serve the older clients. So one of my to-do lists this week is actually to you will be contacted by me, because I do want a personal approach to everyone who has attended my webinars, who have done business with me. I'm meeting my ex-clients again, online, to talk about how her business is doing. It's sometimes easier to just connect and get referrals and just care for the people you already know, than trying to make all these weird new connections to strangers, right? But if your clients have been feeling all this time that you care about them, for the most part, when things get bad, they stand by you. Okay, this was a lesson I learned during the SARS epidemic. I was not able to call or meet my clients. Even calling them, they would not have the time to speak to me, because they were doing a lot of these crisis handling around their hotels. But because I maintained the relationship through fax and emails as best I can, when the epidemic was over, we lost no clients. I mean, everybody came back. They loved the support that we gave and the support that we have given throughout the years. And sometimes we had to increase the price. I remember when the currency fell towards the US dollar and every one of our products were imported, we had to increase prices 400%. That's how bad it was. But we lost very, very little clients, because everybody stood by us just like we've stood by them. Again, as I said, the third strategy is really to be more client-centric. If you're not doing this already, go ask your clients, what do they want? What do they need to buy? at this point. They still need to buy. They still need stuff. Can you imagine if, let's say, your clients are corporations, for instance, let's say you do well-being coaching or fitness coaching to corporates or something. For the most part, unless the whole thing has closed down, people might be furloughed, but even people who are furloughed, they're still kind of a team. They're still trying to engage them, with activities. They're still trying to have occasional meetings just to catch up, just to make sure everybody's still engaged. Can you imagine being the HR person? You still have a team of a few hundred people working from home, if not furloughed, right? They still need something, and it may not be something they're willing to pay for, but it is an opportunity for you to build that emotional bank account. They're still at work. They're just not in the office. And maybe they're not willing to pay for it in a big budget like they used to have, but maybe they're willing to work on something customized for their budget at this point. I think in general, people are still fair. I've been speaking to people as well. People are still fair. People are still doing business. People still want to invest. They still they of course have other concerns right now, but they are still working. So find out, what do they need or want to buy? Okay. And almost to the point where it's no longer about what you sell. I know of a logistics company. They're actually delivering things, non-food, but because of what's happening, they've switched their business model to food delivery. Well, we know from the news that even car manufacturing companies have started manufacturing ventilators, because who wants to buy cars these days? Okay. So again, think about what your clients want and need, not, and just trust that. And your job is to build a network and the capacity to deliver that. Okay. It's not your passion, it's not your purpose, whatever. Well, it depends what you're looking for. If you want to stick with your purpose and passion and everything like that, well, some of you will need to wait until all this is over. But if you're wanting to just survive and perhaps think of ways to thrive through this, you might want to open yourself up to other opportunities that is different from what you're used to. Let's talk about system improvements, because system improvements are very important when you're trying to be adaptive. It's usually, it's these operations, it's your policies, it's your procedures that sometimes get you stuck. Okay, so I promised 2 system improvements. I'll give you 3, just because when I was doing this, I thought of one more, and typical me, I couldn't hold back. So here's a couple of things. Number 1, quite obvious, but I have to say it again, be tech savvy. Okay, if you're not used to meetings online, if you've got this belief that, rapport can be built only if you meet people, you're not going to make it. I was forced to do this coaching online and selling online years ago, because in Indonesia, when you're trying to get to a meeting, it takes about 1 to 2 hours. And if you look at a daily productivity, I wouldn't be productive if I had to coach people and drive around and coach people. Or even if my clients had to come to me, they'd have to spend 2 hours. So it wasn't very productive, nor was it congruent for me to be a coach that says, you got to save time and be time efficient and only provide a face-to-face option. HR people, when they wanted to hire me for a keynote speech or a coaching session for their team, they would say, can you come down to our office, and we want to spend 30 minutes with you telling you about what we need. And I said, well, open up your Zoom, or let's get on a phone call, because at that time Zoom was not available, and talk it through. I mean, for me to find the time to spend 3 hours going back and forth and meeting with you, versus for me to find 20 minutes to talk to you, it's easier for me to find 20 minutes. And it's the same for them. So by force, I had to be more tech savvy. People say, well, you can't read body language over the phone. I mean, now you have Zoom, turn on the video, you can see the body language. Back then, I did not have Zoom, but I tell you what, when you get sensitive with it and when you have enough practice, you can tell body language over the phone. You can tell hesitant tones of voice. You can tell when people are lying. You can tell when people are not sure, not confident. And it's amazing, we know this with people who are, for instance, if you're blind, you know that the other senses get a lot more sensitive because you're operating with less senses. So when you only have your ear to rely on, it's amazing how sensitive that can be and how sharp that can be. What I experienced sometimes in the beginning of my phone coaching experience, because again, at that time, broadband was not very reliable. We did not have Zoom. We had Skype, but to be honest, sometimes it's just the broadband was not available for in our part of the world. I had to close my eyes and I listened to people, and I detected the nuances in their voice. And it just takes practice, and now with Zoom and video sharing and screen share, it's a lot easier. So I think there's absolutely no reason, except for the reason that we make up in our own heads, why we can't be doing things online. So I do encourage you to be more tech savvy. Be lean. If you've got 23 steps to get something done, see if you can do it in 15. See if you can do it in 10. Okay. Question your process. Why does it have to take so long to get something done? And be flexible. Be flexible means you got to be adaptive. You've got to if you're going to have a plan A, you've got to have a plan B. Okay. Actually, just prepare. If, let's say, here's the reality, and this is just from what I hear from the radio today. All this is over. Okay. Let's say all this is over. We're no longer in a lockdown. This is what the reality of this has been. The UK government has spent a lot of money paying for furlough, paying for incentives and everything to keep business alive. Guess what? The economy, as many people will know, inflation is going to go up. For the next year, a couple of years, people say generations, I don't know, but let's say at least for the next couple of years, the British society, and probably worldwide as well, is going to bear the debt. It's going to have to pay back the debt that's been caused by all of this. So that's not an easy job. It's still going to be impacted. The creativity is still needed in business. But that's not all. UK is finished with the lockdown. Everybody's healthy and everything is under control. But it doesn't mean people beyond our borders have got the same healthcare system. It doesn't mean that when travel bans get lifted, healthy people are going to be roaming around the world. We might still have a problem with a certain country. And when the travel bans are lifted, that particular visitor can come and reinfect the society. It could be a relapse. Nobody, and it's useless to say, well, how are they going to prevent that? Nobody knows. Nobody's ever experienced this before. So just be prepared and focus on what you can control. From now on, you always need a contingency plan. Okay, this is just how it's going to be. This is the new norm. So be flexible. If your customers can't do business with you this way, what are you going to do? Okay, so everybody's got their thing. And this is, I know I can't explain for each and every one of you in this webinar. That's why it's maybe useful for some of you to get in touch with me personally if you want to hash it through for your business. But everybody's got a different definition of what flexible means. Yeah, for me, flexibility means face-to-face interaction turns into an online interaction. Face-to-face keynote speech, like this afternoon, I'm going to be a keynote speaker in a group, in a business group. That's going to take place over some platform I haven't used before, but it's going to be online. Last Saturday, I was an online panelist in Indonesia for a live stream event for young entrepreneurs. Okay, so for me, flexibility is the way I deliver my service. For me, flexibility is also the way people pay. People used to pay me a year in advance for coaching, upfront, 12 months in advance. So cash flow was never a problem. However, nowadays, just getting a few £1,000s from them, cash in advance, is a problem. So is your payment schedule, installments, flexible? Your programs, is it only off the shelf, or can that be flexible towards people's needs? If you're a service provider and you're starting out, I understand that you need to build up your expertise to create flexibility in your program. For some of you who are experts in this, you need to perhaps think about what does flexibility mean for your industry? Okay, so that's the thing that you need to think about. Team rituals. What are some of the team rituals to strengthen your team engagement? Again, we talked about this for clients. Let's talk about this towards the team. If you have been treating your team members as a number or your outsourced partners as a number, you can bet that when crisis hits, many of them may not stand by your side, may be not very loyal, may not be as supportive as you'd like them to be. So from now, what are some of the rituals, even though everybody's working from home, what are some of the rituals for you to say thank you, to appreciate, to connect with them? We've got my partner's kids are at home, and I've listened to their Zoom calls with their colleagues and everything. They're going at it quite creatively. They're having pub quizzes, on certain nights just to keep everybody engaged. I don't talk about work all the time, but it's building a high emotional bank account. And many of them, I know that for one of their companies, is just really, really supportive of the owners, and they were sad to see what the impact this has had on their business. So they're very emotionally engaged because of that. So back to you. What is it? For us in my company, we have daily huddles. We have daily huddles in the morning, and we have daily huddles in the evening as well. They talk about different things. Morning is about setting goals and expectations and commitments. Evening is about reporting small wins that you had along the way. So it keeps people connected. It also keeps people moving forward. Many of you don't have teams. So whatever a team means to you, it could be your suppliers, it could be your partners, it could be your outsource vendors, whatever it is. How do you build a high emotional bank account with them? Cross-training people. Again, many of you don't have teams, but just in case you are on this call and you do, I think we've learned that when somebody gets sick, somebody else has to do the work. So are your teams cross-trained? Do people know the basics of each other's job? One of the people the kids that's at home right now, he's had to do operations job, even though he's in sales, because the operations guy can no longer work. It's been furloughed. So there you go. What are you going to do? Right? So you've got to do your own invoicing. So how do we do that? How do you cross-train? Intentionally, even though things get better, I would suggest intentionally hold meetings online. Just keep doing this online thing, because again, contingency planning is going to be the new norm. We never know if there's going to be a new virus or a new disruption in society. And some of you might actually discover that the blessing in disguise from this is really the fact that, I don't need that big office. I don't need that meeting room. Actually, I can continue to have meetings online. It's been pretty effective. Okay. And maybe this is a ritual that you want to keep going with. In general, if you do have a team, this could be a great time for you to foster team engagement. There are team engagement programs out there. I'm connected to a program called Engage and Grow. I have a few coaches that's doing it in the UK, and of course also in Indonesia and in Asia, if you need, depending on where you are on this call. But I think this is a perfect time, okay, to work on it with a coach, to take 12 weeks to increase your team engagement. Because sometimes the problem we have is when business is back, nobody has time, right? Everybody's busy, but now people do have time. So let's use that instead of just worrying about things. So again, that was the 10 ways to crisis-proof your business. I hope that you have gotten some, valuable lessons and valuable insights and questions that you can go ask yourself. It's about moving from a state of fear and worry to let's do something about it in the Brave Zone. So that's what this is all about. And it's been a pleasure serving you, and all the best. Do take care, keep safe, and we'll see you in the next webinar. Bye now.